Sure.
There, you want our names on these?
Huh?
You want our name on these?
No, I don't. You actually can keep them if you want. I usually, if the student wanders into me, then I give them this so I can get the feedback. When I do this for my Psych 109, there's a very similar one in the book that they'll have done already. So we'll have already talked about it. But what you do then is look at the scores, and usually people will have 2, sometimes 3, that are higher than others.
Okay.
And
much higher?
sometimes there'll be only 1 point. Sometimes they're going to be scattered like yours, though. And then really it just means that you're pretty well balanced between the ways you approach things, that, which means you're probably a much better teacher than I am.
No.
Do we need any kind of introduction or anything? Okay.
You can just maybe say we're going to talk about taking tests.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, we are going to talk about test taking today, and I call this Test Taking 101. And I really, when I talk to people about test taking, I say, you've got to think about this as a game or as a challenge, not doomsday, but just a challenge. And I always start out by asking the students to get some ideas about how they learn. And now, as we looked over this, if you are either high in this verbal linguistic or the, where's my other one? Math skills, logical mathematical skills, you are high in the areas that most people use in a classroom. And most of what we think of as educational learning occurs. Most of the people that I deal with are going to find that their strengths lie elsewhere, which is probably why they come to see me a lot. But it doesn't matter. It's all based on Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence. And by the way, I do have some handouts. So, if you are a verbal linguistic or a logical mathematical person, or both, strengths-wise, then you probably already do pretty well in school-related things. Usually, unless there's some real anxiety issues with testing, that's probably where I'm going to go with that. But if it does also have something to do with preparation. So, you would look at wherever your high scores are, and then you look at the learning techniques, and these are the things that I would be pointing out to you then. So if you are a verbal linguistic person, these are typical teacher things. Highlight 10% or less, rewrite the notes, teach someone else, recite information, write it out. Those are the kind of things we usually do. In the logical mathematical area, looking for organization and logic, explaining them sequentially, those kind of things, which analyzing data, charts, graphs, sound like what you're used to. Now, if your strengths are in other areas, I would then point out ways that students could adapt their studying to some of these techniques. So if you're a musical person, put it to music, whatever you're trying to remember. And we actually do that down in the lab. Sue every so often will be singing same sign, add and keep, different sign, subtract. Trying to keep people and sign numbers straight. We say play an instrument, beat out a rhythm. Rhythms with whatever you're trying to remember is also a good way. If you are a visual spatial person, make pictures. And I'm going to talk about some of those here in just a little bit. If you are a kinesthetic person, the movement, the actual movement of something that you're doing is going to make a difference in how you remember it. And it's one of the things that's my strength. I remember accidentally learning that because you couldn't take books out of the library and having to take notes. Well, I realized if I wrote the notes, I didn't have to go back and read them because I remembered. I thought, oh, why didn't somebody tell me this a long time ago? If you're an intrapersonal person, now that's the one that's kind of a into themselves kind of person, quiet person, they need more time, and they need to realize that they need more time. Time to think about what they're doing, time to connect whatever they're doing to something that's familiar before they actually act on it. If you're the people person, study groups are your thing. Teaching someone else is a good strategy that I highlight a lot. Even if you don't have anybody to teach the dog. The dog will sit there and listen to you for hours and look interested. The naturalist person, if you can connect things to things that you know that you're familiar with from the outdoors or from nature in some way, usually is a helpful way to study. So I give them that, and then we talk about what I'm going to talk about. Starting with, if you're going to take a test, the first thing you have to do is be prepared for the test. So I talk to them about mentally being prepared, and I usually link this to something that's familiar in their background, but I can often link it to something like some athletic thing that they've done, because most students that I deal with now have had some kind of participation in some kind of a sport at some level. So you say, you know, your coach, does your coach say to tell yourself that you can't do things? Not usually. Not a good coach anyway. Coach is going to remind you that you can do it right, do it however. So you can be your own coach. You can talk to yourself. And for those students with anxiety, these are really some of the places where the anxiety gets in their way. And often I'll find that they have a lot of negative self-talk that they're doing. So talking positively about what you're learning, reminding yourself that you do know this, talking to yourself in a positive manner. And when that negative thing comes on, turn it off. Just like it's a little video or an audio running in your head. I even tell some of them, make the motion, turn the switch. Just be sure that you are consciously thinking you're turning this off, getting rid of it. Talking about mindset, be positive. Talk about some positive things that tests are for. Now, as a faculty person, I've made tests myself. The purpose of a test is not to make a student miserable. The purpose of a test, for me, is to figure out if I'm doing my job and teaching the student what they need to know. And from the student's perspective, are they doing their job? Are they learning this material, making this material theirs, so that they understand and can communicate back to me? So it's just a method of communication. When I am putting something together, I start out by making the test. Not because I think teaching to the test is right or wrong. I think it's, of course I'm going to teach the test. The test is supposed to measure what I'm doing. So I start out by deciding what it is that I want the outcome to be. What do I want my people to know? And I put that into the test. Then I put my activities together in such a way that it's going to lead them to this knowledge, hopefully. And hopefully by the time they get ready to take the test, they're going to be ready. And sometimes I do explain that to students, that as a faculty person, that's what I do. My job is to put the material out there. Your job is to learn it, and we work together.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, you can ask any question.
Thanks. Okay. In our case, because we are such a short course, okay, Mike has to get our students prepared generally within 2.5 days to be able to go to the DMV and permit. So we are on a very, very scrunched time frame. And I think that's why a lot of our students have anxiety or they're overwhelmed. When you're on a short time frame, what is your technique? What is your suggestion?
Regardless of the time frame, I'm saying, okay, this is the thing that we're focusing on now. This is what you need to do. And then putting it into steps that we agree on that we can do. I also really try to be mindful of the strengths of the people that I'm working with. So what do you think are usually the kind of strengths that you're going to be working with for the people that you're working with?
It varies.
It'll always vary a little, but are there some that...
We have huge variances.
Okay.
I mean, we run anywhere from people with prior experience in the industry itself to somebody that has
Language barriers.
Language barriers, to somebody who's never been, you know, anywhere close to a tractor trailer.
So there are lots of things that...
Correct.
And then I think I would be giving them things to do that give them options. Some that are reading, some that are activities. You know, I would be looking at these different ways of learning, ways of thinking, and trying to get some things that would be homework time things that people would do. I can link it maybe to something that's mathematical. My more verbal students, I tell them to talk through things. My students that are more hands-on, I have them make movements. Excuse me. And I'm going to talk about a little of this but rehearsing things. Well, we're just doing the mental rehearsal now. I use as an example, my daughter used to be in gymnastics, and I've also known people in other sports. And as they're preparing, there's a mental part to preparing for that. She used to be sitting over there and her hands would be going like this. What she was doing was mentally going over her routines. Mm-hmm. What you actually saw was maybe a finger-twip chair there, but it all meant something to her. And those are the kind of things that sometimes that mental rehearsal is part of it, because when we talk about test taking, we talk about practice the test environment. Where are they going to be? And they're going to be sitting in, this is the written part, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're going to be taking a written test. So you're going to be practicing taking a written test. When you study, you lay out all of your notes and then you look back, and that's great. After you're finished with that, you should practice without looking the same kinds of questions, because you know that's what you're going to get. If you know what kind of questions they are, I haven't seen that CDL. Is that what?
See, we don't write. We don't.
But
see, and that
is it multiple choice?
Well, it is. But my next question is how do you prepare somebody? Obviously, as a teacher, if I write the test, I can parlay that information that's on the test. But because they're taking the test at the DMV, we don't have any idea what questions are going to be asked.
But is it like the one that's for like driver's licenses where there are sample questions? Then there are things they can look at, and they can make their own questions. No, they're not.
It's specific.
Yeah. It's pretty specific.
Yeah, because I mean, you're dealing with a tractor trailer and all the other rules and regulations of the road. So you're dealing with equipment also. You got to learn equipment. You got to learn road rules and regulations. And
from what some of the students have told me, of course, it's been years since I've taken that test, and what some of them have come back and told me is that the questions are not cut and dried answers.
Usually when I get students that tell me those kind of things, what I think they're getting is they're not used to thinking of the question in that way. And here's where I talk to students about, you have to make this information yours. You have to not only know it, you have to be able to explain it. And this is a strategy that actually works when I say, teach somebody else. And talk to the dog. Maybe he'll get a smart dog and he'll be able to get a CDL, but I doubt it. But
if we do, we're going to be rich.
That's true too. But really, thinking about how would you tell somebody else how to do this? Or how would you tell somebody else what to do in the case of whatever stuff you're talking about? And I know very little about driving a truck, except that it's very much bigger than my bug, and I'll stay away from it, thank you. But, you know, how would you tell somebody else how to do this? How would you explain it? What do they need to know? What do they need to know before you answer that question? Because there's a lot of things that are like prior knowledge. You need to know something about your equipment if you know how to use it. So when you're talking to people, explain it. When I say you learn something and you go home and you practice it, that's your homework. And then after that, you have to shut the book and you have to be able to do it again. So whether it's a quiz, I do it a lot with math. I say you close the book, you put out some problems, now you do them without looking, and what you're really thinking of is the test is like being on stage. When you can sing along, when the radio's on, you sing along with the radio, you always know all the words. But when you get stuck up on stage with a microphone, you have to know everything. And that's what you've got to be looking at when you get ready for a test. And a lot of times, the people that I'm working with, when they're asking me these questions, what they've really done is they've given it a look over, they haven't really made it theirs. And that's a step in the process. When I'm talking about math problems, I say, you go home, you do your math problems, close the book, pick out 2 or 3 problems, do them without looking. If you can't do them without looking, you're not done yet. The next day, you go home, you do your homework, you practice the ones you did last time, and you practice some more. By the time you get ready to take a test, you should be looking at notes and practicing things that you've been practicing without looking, because that's what you have to be able to do to go into a test. And everybody that I've ever talked to, I say, what do you like to do? And they'll tell me whatever it is. Say, when you want to know something about that, what do you do? Well, then they find out whatever they want to know. And, you know, people can argue with me about statistics and sports or racing or lots of different things, and they know that because they've made that theirs. You have to make this yours. And that's a step that most of the students that I work with don't know and don't think about. So when we're doing the preparation, how you study is really kind of important to do those things, is to figure out the best ways. And I put some things up here because I have people who are visual, and if there's 3 steps in a process, I give them a triangle. 1, 2, 3, and they remember things by the picture. If it's steps in a process and they're more logical, I'll give them just numbers, and you can put those up there. If they're a verbal person, talk yourself through it. What are you doing? Talk yourself through it. And as you're learning, figure out what is helping me remember. Is it a picture? Is it some little technique? Is it an acronym? And you can make an acronym for anything. What kind of things do you do? I know that truck drivers have to walk around the truck and do several things. I remember they kick the tires, among other things. But is there an acronym for that? You know, different things that they can do. And then practice visualizing. Come on in. Are you coming for test taking?
Yes.
Well, have a seat. I didn't have your name on there, but have a seat. And we're starting to talk about test taking. And I've really started talking really about the preparation part, about the things that you do. And I'm probably going to have to go a little farther. You can always interrupt me and ask. Okay? And let's see, I'll just kind of go on now. But then there's during the test. And one of the things that most of the students that I work with will say as they're going into the test is they walk in there and they just blank out. Well, that's fine. I've certainly gone into a test often enough with a feeling that I'd like to hold my hands over my ears so nothing gets out until at least I get in there. And there are some strategies for that, and one of them that I like best is to take a piece of paper with you, blank piece of paper. If they'll allow it, if they don't, you know, show them what you got so you know it's an empty piece of paper. Some instructors will say, well, I'll give you a piece of paper because they don't trust them, so fine, give them a piece of paper. Do a brain dump. Write down whatever it is that you've been using as your memory techniques. Steps in a process, write down the steps. If you use a triangle because there's 3 and you've got 1 and 2 and 3, put the triangle down. Then fill in the blanks. If there are formulas that you were trying to remember, write the formulas down. Whatever it is, whatever the things are that they need to remember, if you can put them down, then you don't have to dredge that whole thing up there every time you're answering a test because you've got it written down now. So now you can use the notes that you just created. It's called a brain dump. But dump it out, get it all in there. And you know, sometimes when I've done that, I can remember 1 and 3 and I can't remember 2. That's okay. Put 1 and 3, 1, 2, 3 down, fill in what you know, leave the rest blank, keep going, get all of it dumped out that you've been trying to use to remember. And then, since most of it's out, some of the other stuff will come up. Occasionally it'll come up as you go through the test. But do whatever is there that'll help.
And if they can't do that, because the state won't allow.
Won't allow paper?
No.
Nothing.
Okay. If the state won't allow it, you have no choice. But most of the time, at least in classes,
But we could
they can do
it
it.
before we send them out
Yeah.
today. You could prepare them.
You could do them with a
Write it
practice and think, okay, what are you using? What are your things that you remember? Try to get it to be things that you can take in with you. And I've used this. I said, you take an anatomy test, you're going to take your body in with you. Start poking. Where's this? Where's that? You know, they can't take your body away.
So you can do that.
You can even use things that you do. I remember watching a student one time, was a dental hygiene student. She was taking the test that had something to do with x-rays. And she was in there taking the test, and she's going like this, and she'll write something down. She's going like this. I have no idea what it meant, but it meant something to her. And it helped her to answer the questions on that particular test. You can do those kind of things. Steps, those are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5s. You've got bumps on your hand if you need more. You know, just there's a triangle. Create whatever you need and try to make it something you can take in with you. Another thing that I teach students, a lot of students, because they're visual, I said, when you're preparing for a test, many of them will tell me, I remember the answer to that. I knew it was at the bottom of the page. There was a picture of a boat beside it. I said, okay, here, shut your eyes and read it off the board. Shut your eyes and practice reading. It's the next step. And if you've practiced that way, then when you get to the test, you can shut your eyes. It'll still be there. Nobody has a photographic memory, but if you are teaching yourself as you work on memorizing things to read them off a board or something, then you're just practicing what you're going to do later. And that's something you can take with you. Creating those kind of things. Some people have better memories than others. Some people work at it longer than others. Some people are just gifted. They're not fair to the rest of us, but you know.
So in our case, Mike, in classroom, you could actually give them a question, tell them to close their eyes, and give you the answer.
Yeah.
So then we go over the test, and I think that's probably mostly multiple choice for your test. But I'll go over
choice, true, false.
Okay. Well, true, false questions throw some people. And one of the things that you got to remember is if it's got more than one part and they're not all true, it's not true. And that confuses a lot of people. They don't understand that. So, I actually give a test where I give them questions. And part of it's true, first part always, and the second part isn't. So if they don't read the whole question, they've blown it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you do have to, and they have, these are just, now it becomes a game. When you get to the test questions, it's a game. It's just like any other game. If you ever raced anywhere, you learn to lean into the tape. If you're a gymnast, extension, extension, extension. If you're a basketball player, there's follow through. All of those things make a difference in how you're going to do. So it becomes a game. All of the little tricks are going to make a difference. And if they make a difference of 1 point, and that's the difference between passing or not passing, it's worth it. Or an A or a B, which is good. So, first of all, I put it in here in big letters, and you're welcome to use this handout anytime you want to. Read all the directions. And there's actually a test that floats around here from time to time where there's a whole list of things to do. And it starts out, it says to write your name in the upper right-hand corner and then put your date, and then it gets sillier as you go down, like stand on your chair and say your name and circle the thes in green, and you begin to, and you get to the end and it says only do 1 and 2. And the first one says read all of the questions first, and the second one says write your name in the top right-hand corner. Read the directions. The other philosophy I have is never leave anything blank unless there's a penalty. And the only test I've ever seen with a penalty is a national math test, where you can get a negative number. Because otherwise, If you put in an answer, you've got a 1 in 4 chance of it being right. So, do the brain dump, check the test out, see what's there, check point values. Won't make much difference on that test because it's probably all the same, but for some tests it does. And make yourself a plan for how you're going to do it within the time limit. Do they have all the time they need?
To a point.
To a point.
Within reason.
Yeah, the state will allow them X amount of time, and then once that time's done, they'll shut the machine
They
down.
usually have it, and it's usually a couple of hours.
Yeah.
Okay, so they've got.
They've got plenty of time.
So you don't have to worry about the time. If you're in a classroom and you've got 50 minutes, the clock is ticking from the time you get in there. One thing I say is go early. Sometimes you can get the test early. Maybe it gives you 5 more minutes, 3 minutes. Maybe it makes a difference. Never leave anything blank. So true, false question. Watch for absolutes. Very few things are always true or never true. There's almost always an exception. I slip that question in because I say you always have a choice. And then I say always and never are danger words. Watch them because there's probably an exception. Let's see, what double negatives? And I hate these questions when I get them on a test myself. It is not untrue that the sun comes up in the east. By the time you read the not and untrue, you're not sure what direction east is. And what you do if they're double negatives, now you have to know enough grammar to know it's a double negative, scratch out the 2 negatives. It is true that the sun comes up in the east. The question now makes sense.
Do we have any of those on our tests? I haven't seen any double negatives.
I don't think it are on ours.
I don't think it's on yours because the state's not that mean.
You know what? The state's
they are.
pretty
Are they?
ornery. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, they can throw one little word in there that will change the whole meaning. So
Well,
we
that's
tell
why I
them
say
not
you
to do
read
that.
the entire
Well,
question. That's another
and-
thing. Read the entire question.
That's another question that I have is how do you drill into a student enough to read the entire question before you answer it?
And we tell them, do not skim in. They
Yeah.
come back and the biggest fail rate for them is, Mike will say, okay, what question did you fail on? I didn't read the whole question. Yeah, we cannot
I don't know,
convince
how do you
them.
convey that to them other than just don't
Repeat
do
it, repeat it, repeat it, repeat it. If you don't read the entire question, you're going to be sorry. Maybe you have to put it in a term that makes more sense. You could fail this test because
Yeah. Oh, and I see it time and time again.
I tell them it
Even-
when I'm in orientation. with
Even
them.
on our classroom tests, you got to read the entire.
oh, and I put, when I'm doing this test taking thing, I have a test that they actually take, and I put all of those things in there to catch them, to try to catch them. Because the goal of this test is to get 100. If you do all of the things that I just told you to do, you will pass this test with 100. Very rarely do I get 100. But a few times I've gotten some people that really begin to say, okay, I'm going to get them. I'm going to get them all. Let's see. In multiple choice, some people just get overwhelmed with answers. I say, well, you go through and you eliminate wrong answers because sometimes there's just obviously things that are wrong. Sometimes they're going to contradict each other, so one of them's got to be wrong. And if both of them are wrong, that eliminates the whole problem for those two. That increases your chances. Another thing they can do is read the question, cover the answers and come up with their own answer, and then find the answer in the options. If they get really mixed up, that's a good strategy to use. Treat each option as true or false. Read the question, read the first option, true or false. And you don't have to waste your time on the ones that you already know are wrong. So maybe you've got 2 left, and you read the whole question and one option. Is this true? Is this false? Read the next one, true, false. Sometimes that's a way of sorting them out when you get to that point.
And we, though, also have a problem because the state will give them 4 answers and they're all actually correct. But they're looking for the
looking for
best.
the
Okay, and the health department does that here all the time.
Yeah.
And here's the deal. usually the best answer is what would you do first? And in the health careers, there are some things that you do. First, you look for vital certain signs, and if those signs aren't there, then you don't have to do anything else. So, you know, put them in a priority. What do you do first? That's usually going to be the best answer. And make a list of which is which. Think here.
Yeah, we get those.
Yeah.
All the time.
The health department does that all the time, and they do that because when you're in a health field and you walk into a patient, you've got to be able to sort things out and prioritize. So I said, well, you better start now. I don't want to meet you and you still don't know.
Absolutely. Great.
Let's see, treat each option as true or false. We did that. You don't have to worry about essay questions, but these guys might sometimes. Things with an essay question, I always say, first of all, write everything you know. But the question, kind of come up with a plan. Now, how long is this essay question supposed to be? Is it a page and a half? You better have a nice plan. If it's a short answer, it still probably means 5 sentences, give or take. And what points do you need to make? Just write them down. I used to get these history tests when I took a history class one summer, and he gave all essay tests, and there would be like 10 things, and I'd say, okay, I just write them down. I had a list for everything as I was going in, and so I say, okay, there's 10 of them. Write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Come on, something. And then once I had them written, then I could get them into sentences that made sense. Just a kind of a quickie outline.
Okay, so you write down the points.
The points that you have to make. Because when you see an essay question, somebody wants to know something, and usually it's some things. Now occasionally you're going to have to watch what the words say in the question. Does it say define? Does it say compare, contrast? Look for those kind of words in the question. What does it want you to do? Tell about? Write everything you know. A lot of times people say, well, I don't know anything. I say, okay, you went to the class, you know something. I don't care how remote it is, get it on paper. You might get a point. Every point counts. Put down whatever you can do. Sometimes when you write one thing down, something else comes to you, and you know, it's going, and you get all the points you can that way. Oh, where's my other side? Okay, fill in the blank. And as an instructor, I avoid fill in the blank because I have found that when I fill in the blank, not everybody thinks the way I do. But if there's a word bank, use it. Reread the statement with the word that you think goes in the blank. Does it make sense? And watch for grammar clues. Things like if the word an is in front of a blank, and there's only one word in the bank that begins with a vowel, you found it. If there's an ending on it and it doesn't make sense with that ending, that's probably not right. ED, ING, S. Check those things out because those can be really good clues. If you're doing a matching, which I don't think they have either, right? But you guys might. If you're doing matching, skim through quickly, do the ones you know, and mark the answers you've used, but don't obliterate the answers. Just put a little X beside them or something. In case you change your mind, you still want to be able to read it. Go through, do the ones you know. That eliminates some of them that you have to reread and reread, and then try to match the rest of them up as best you can. Again, never leave anything blank. I guarantee you a blank one is wrong. So don't leave it blank. Now, after you leave the test, which is what you're saying, which I think, because they can take this test more than once, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the time to be doing that. When you walk out of a test, if there's something you didn't know, write it down somewhere right now so you don't forget that you need to know that. Check the answers to anything you weren't sure of. You put an answer in, but you weren't sure which one was right. Check it right after you leave the test, before you go anywhere else and forget it. Check it. Make notes of the things that were on there that you knew nothing about, or make notes that are on there the things you need to know about. And modify your study plan for the next test. Because these are the things you're going to need to know. Now, you were talking about test anxiety, and we'll go back to the beginning with test anxiety. You can talk yourself into or out of pretty much anything, and I'll bet everybody's done it from time to time. You've talked yourself into something you knew you shouldn't do. You've talked yourself out of something that you knew you should do. We all are really good at fooling ourselves. So, from the very beginning, you've got to talk yourself into doing what you need to do. From the preparation, from as you go through the test, as you go through the item by item list, you've got to be talking yourself into read the question. Look for those keywords. I don't know if you know Nancy Rowley, she used to work here, but she was an interpreter for the hearing impaired, and in order to be certified as an interpreter, you have to take a test. It costs money to take this test, and although you can take it as many times as you want, you have to pay for it each time. And she got the test, and you know, they pass it out to everybody, and of course it says do not write on this test, but she says, I paid $200 for that test. I circled every keyword, I marked everything. I did everything to increase my chances of passing that test, and she passed it on the first try. She says, $200, they can make another test for the next person.
When it comes to tests, I can talk myself into it, but once the test gets right in front of me, it's like everything goes blank.
Well, you didn't get here in time to hear about the brain dump. Dump out what you've practiced. So any formulas, any lists of things that you've done, any kind of things that you've created that you've been working with that's helping you to, when you were studying, write them down and then fill in the answers beside them. There are steps in a process, write down 1, 2, 3, however many there were, then fill in what they were in just one word, but enough to make you know what you're talking about. Once you've got that, it's out. Maybe you don't remember all of them, but you remember part of them. Well, get the part you know. After you've got the rest of them down, maybe the other one will come to you. Maybe it'll come to you while you're taking the test. Go back and fill it in then. But write it out. I said you can ask your instructor ahead of time for a blank piece of paper. You can bring in a blank piece of paper. Make sure you get your instructor's permission to do that so they know that you didn't bring in your notes. Okay. but make your notes and then use your notes to answer the questions. Everybody's got so much working memory. You want to be able to use all of it on the test. The test is a game. It's a challenge. Just think of it as a challenge, like a puzzle. Okay. It's a game. Who can get the most points? Who knows all the tricks? And I will tell you that once in my college career, when I forgot that we had a test, I went into this test thinking, oh my God. And I used every one of these things, but I passed the test. Wasn't my best work, but
you passed.
I passed. And of course, the other thing is, when you go into a test, there's a lot of adrenaline pumping. Yeah, have you ever played any sports? Been in any sports? Yes. Okay, you should have a little adrenaline. You go into a game or your sport, whatever, you've got to have it, but you can't have too much because it'll trip you up. Okay, who's running your life? Who's running your head? Slow it down, calm it down, whatever you need to do to calm it down. And there's lots of techniques for that. There are things like you could shut your eyes, put yourself on a nice quiet beach, and the waves are blowing in, you know. But they're really tricks. They're self-hypnosis. And I will tell you one that I have done. Maybe your guys would work with this one too. I have an aunt who's a little bit crazy and hyper, and she went to a relaxation class once. She was telling me, we're laying in the gym on the floor, and the teacher is saying, relax, relax your toes. She says, I'm going like this. Well, she probably was, but I've done this with junior high kids, with adults. I also did it with daycare center kids. Freeze like an ice cube, stiffen everything up. Now, while I'm talking, you're going to do this. So kind of freeze up here. Okay, now it's getting warmer. You're an ice cube. It's getting warmer, and your toes are starting to melt. Let them relax, and now your feet are starting to melt. Let them relax, just your feet. And now your legs, now your knees, now your legs, now your torso, beginning to relax. Nice warm day, sun's out, fingers are relaxing, shoulders are relaxing, hair is beginning to melt, face is beginning to melt. Now you're just sitting there, nice little puddle sitting in the middle of the desk. Are you relaxed? You have to practice. When I had a daycare center, I put the kids to sleep that way. Read them a few stories, froze them like ice cubes, melted them down. Some of them were asleep by the time I finished, after they'd done it a few times. Also put myself to sleep once that way. But I did two things. First of all, you have to concentrate on what you're doing, and it takes your mind off of that feeling. Second of all, think slowly. Talk yourself slowly through it. And I kind of lowered my voice and slowed my voice down, and it makes a difference. And these are all things that go with who's running your head. Because most of what happens with test anxiety is in your head.
Correct.
You're fighting with your own self. So you can practice these techniques beforehand, because they're not going to work if you try them for the first time. Well, they may help better than nothing, but they're going to work much better if you've practiced them at home. So whatever your relaxation technique, whether it's a nice beach or you picture whatever you want to see, that's going to make you relaxed and happy. But it's a way to slow yourself down, relax a little bit. They won't let you jump or shake your arms or anything like that, so you'll have to do something quiet. But you're running your head. Make sure you're running it the way you want to. Don't let the test run you. And the last thing I tell people is, this is a test. You've heard this, you used to hear this on the TV all the time. This is a test. This is only a test. Had it been a real emergency, you would have been sent to... It's only a test. The sun will come up tomorrow. The world will not end. Now, let's just go back to seeing how well you can do it. It's just a game. How many points can you make? You have to study. You have to be prepared. There is no substitute for that. Then you go through the test, looking at the questions, attack your questions. You've got a plan on what to do and how to do it. And everything you do is going to be now to be increasing the chances that you will get the grade you want. You will get them right. True-false questions, you've got a 50-50 shot. Multiple choice, usually it's a 1 in 4. That's 25%. So even if you guess, that's better than not doing it at all. Okay, now questions for me.
How do you prepare somebody that maybe has been out of school for
Like me.
30 years
35, 40 years.
plus to prepare themselves mentally to take a test?
I think some of the things that we talked about with that preparation are really the key. First of all, anticipating that these are the things that you're going to face. And always the kids that are coming right out of high school, you've been taking tests, and my adult students also say that, well, those kids, they know everything. And of course the kids will tell me, those adults, they know everything. Well, nobody knows everything. They all know different things. Mm-hmm. So you just have to say, okay, you're not used to doing this. What do you do with something that you haven't done for a while? You didn't learn to walk in a day, you just don't remember it. You've got to think about what you're doing. You've got to practice. You've got to prepare. The people you're working with, they probably haven't played basketball for a while. They probably do know how to play basketball. If they were going to go back out and play basketball again, would they walk in cold? Not unless they wanted to wind up in the hospital. They would have to prepare. for anything, you have to prepare. And you have to prepare. Now I have some students who have these little gimmicks, and they're kind of like my brother used to have this pair of socks he wore when he played basketball. Those socks could walk by themselves by the end of the season, let me tell you, because you couldn't touch them, you couldn't wash them, you had to wear them for every game. Oh my goodness. But, you know, whatever works, whatever your lucky charm is. It used to be the sky hook that there was a cartoon with a duck that couldn't swim, kept falling, going right down, and gave him a sky hook. Walked around, swam around there with a sky hook. Whatever convinces you, but you're the one that's going to be convinced. And students do have to do that.
I still think our biggest challenge is our time frame. I mean, if you really, really stop and think, 2.5 days to become knowledgeable enough about a tractor trailer, driving, equipment, it's a lot of cramming.
It is
So
for them.
I think that's our biggest challenge, and that's why we see.
Is the time thing?
Yeah,
That's why we see our students like, I mean, they panic. It's like, oh, I can't go take it today, and it's like they really panic a lot of times. Their anxiety is so high.
Do they know that from the beginning?
Mhm.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
They know
Yeah,
day
because I was
one.
going to say from day one, you've got to
And
be
we
safe.
try, in the beginning, when I get them into the program, I try to give them enough materials to help them out, to at least prepare a little bit for what.
Well, I would be creating those kind of things that we talked about, things like if you're a visual person, then you want the pictures. If you're an auditory person, you want the narrative that you can talk yourself through. If you're the kinesthetic person, write it down, write it down, write it down. You don't have to look at it again, just keep writing it. There's a way that we used to teach spelling words to kids who had difficulty learning, and it's visual, auditory, tactile, kinesthetic. And if you were going to teach them to spell the, you first of all put the word in front of them, and then you said, okay, T, H, E, the. So when they said the letter, they wrote the letter, they heard the letter. And all of those things are important. It's kind of a multisensory way of doing things. Is there ways to act out things or walk through things rather than sit in a class? Are there things that could be done that way? That's the kind of things I'd be looking at with your group.
Some of them can, and some of them, I mean, they're just point blank. There's just stuff that it's like, okay, it's in the book. Here it is,
Find it, read it, make
Yeah.
it. But the key is, whatever it is you're learning, you have to make it yours. You have to be able to not only read it, but be able to tell somebody else. And if nobody else will listen, the dog will listen.
So again, I think that would be one of our new techniques of, you explain it, and then you have the students, like each category
Partners.
for one partner, and tell you about it.
yeah.
Partners to explain
I
it to
think
each
we've got
other.
enough time to try something like that.
Those kind of
Cut
things.
down on some of the other stuff that we don't need so much in the class.
So in some ways that helped me learn is hands-on.
We have said that a lot, and for hands-on, you can create it, even if it doesn't exist. Certainly writing things out, triangles, acting things out. Now you probably aren't going to do that in the classroom, but when you take the test, you could actually visualize yourself doing whatever.
Exactly what happened that day. Okay, well, I remember on this day, this is what we did, step by step.
And that's the way you want to, the way you're going to put it in is the way you're going to get it out. And a lot of our brain research now is telling us people don't forget things, they just forget where they put them. So if you got it in there, it's in there somewhere. But you got to put it in so that you know how to retrieve it. Dig it back out. And that's a very good technique, that visualizing. And I know we did it. I remember doing it. And practicing that before the test. Practicing that, okay, I remember we did it that way, and that day we did this. Now, I don't know what you do with truck driving.
come and sit in our class.
Maybe I do.
Then you'll understand, I think, what our challenges are.
But, you know, if you want to do something like this, if you let me know sometime, I could do something like this with them at some point.
Like I said, the biggest thing
The
we
time
got
was
is
a
just
time
a
challenge.
time frame challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got 7.5 hours. We got what, 15, maybe not even 19 hours to cram.
Okay, but they have time other than when they're in your class.
Correct.
So if you have things that you can send them out to do, and a lot of times, at first, people don't know how to study. They don't know how to do those kind of things.
That's why, you know, because I look at some of our makeup, and what I find is the younger the student is, the better their study habits are. But we get a lot of people that this may be a second or a third career change for them, and they're, you know, 55 to 65 years old, and they haven't been in school for
A long time.
you know, 30 plus years, and they're going, I don't have any idea how to study this. And I don't, you know, I mean, I've continually pretty well stayed in school, not a lot, but
But
I've
you're
had
not
those
that old
study
either.
habits, correct. But I don't know how to parlay
That
to
to
somebody,
them.
okay, this is, you know, these are the things you need to do in order to study this.
Many
Those
times,
types of
many
things.
times students will come to me when they're finding out how to study. And, you know, that's kind of another strategy, another workshop. But how to study is, I read it, or I read it and I read it and I read it. Well, if you didn't, my philosophy is you only read something once, because you haven't got time to read it twice. When you read it the first time, pull out what's important and put it in notes, because you don't have time to go back and do it again. It's a time issue, and that's just for anybody, not
Yeah.
just for people in a crunched one.
That might be something we try too, if we try to, instead of having them highlight, have them write it.
Writing is kinesthetic, so you're using some muscle movement. For some people, that's a difference, is the actual writing, rewriting.
We might make up and say, okay, write this down, it will be on the test.
I say that too sometimes.
Well-
This will be on your test.
What we've done is, over a time period, as the students come back, we say, okay, was there anything on the test that we didn't go over? As far as those questions, because there's a bank of about 300 to 500 questions, and they're only getting a small sample of those questions.
Right, pretty random.
And it's very, very random. You know, one part of the test, they're only getting 30 questions, and the other two parts, they're only getting 20 questions out of 300 to 500. Okay,
If you've
how
ever
do you-
seen those teacher tests that you have to do to be certified, those are written by all kinds of people. I got caught the last time when I got a certification. I had to take those tests. And, oh my gosh, one of them will be a book long, and it's got all these long choices. The next one's 4 or 5 words, just based on which ones you got.
Yeah. So, but typically what I do is I'll have them in class with the book and say, highlight this because we know that's on the test, type of thing.
I work mostly with students who come here, and they call them underprepared. They're in some level they're taking something to get up to college level, and my experience has been a lot of them, if they had been in the college prep from the beginning, would be more able to do the reading and the math learning kind of things that I said. So I'm always saying, find other things to do. Increase, expand your world and increase your chances. But I'm finding that they do this highlighting in the CCS, and don't tell the CCS teachers I said this. But for a lot of them, highlighting doesn't really help, but rewriting it does.
That's what I'm thinking.
So I say, well, you do what you need to do for your teacher, for the class, but if you're trying to make this yours, you've got to figure out what works for you. Because when you go on to college, they're not going to care how you remember it. They're just going to care that you've learned, sociology or psychology or
Correct.
truck driving or whatever it is, so you've got to start figuring out what helps you remember. And if you come back tomorrow and you can't remember your own name, what do you better change? Change something. Because true insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results.
You can't do that.
So, well, we're about out of time because the clock says some people have to go to class.
Well, thank you for inviting us.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad you came.
We're just trying to see how we can help our students as far as helping them with anxiety
The biggest
and
thing